The First Epistle of Paul to Timothy, usually referred to simply as First Timothy and often written 1 Timothy, is one of 3 letters in the New Testament of the Bible, often grouped together as the Pastoral Epistles, along with Second Timothy and Titus. The letter, traditionally attributed to the Apostle Paul, consists mainly of counsels to his younger colleague and delegate Timothy regarding his ministry in Ephesus. These counsels include instructions on the organization of the church and the responsibilities resting on certain groups of leaders therein, as well as exhortations to faithfulness in maintaining the truth amid surrounding errors. Most modern scholars consider the letter pseudepigraphical, perhaps written as late as the first half of the 2nd century AD. Composition. The author of 1 Timothy has been traditionally identified as the Apostle Paul. He is named as the author of the letter in the text. 19th and 20th century scholarship questioned the authenticity of the letter, with many scholars suggesting that 1 Timothy, along with 2 Timothy and Titus, are not original to Paul, but rather an unknown Christian writing sometime in the late 1st to mid-2nd century. Historical views. The genuineness of Pauline authorship was accepted by Church orthodoxy as early as c. AD 180, as evidenced by the surviving testimony of Irenaeus and the author of the Muratorian. Possible allusions are found in the letters from Clement of Rome to the Corinthians, c. 95, Ignatius of Antioch to the Ephesians, c. 110, and Polycarp to the Philippians, c. 130. Late in the 2nd century, there are a number of quotations from all 3 pastoral epistles and Irenaeus' work against heresies. The Muratorian canon, c. 170, 180, lists the books of the NT and describes all 3 pastoral epistles to Paul. Eusebius, c. 330, calls it, along with the other 13 canonical Pauline epistles, undisputed. Marcion, an Orthodox bishop later excommunicated for heresy, formed an early canon of Scripture c. 140 around the Gospel of Luke and 10 of the canonical Pauline epistles, excluding 1, 2 Timothy and Titus. The reasons for these exclusions are unknown, and so speculation abounds, including the hypotheses that they were not written until after Marcion's time, or that he knew of them, but regarded them as inauthentic. Proponents of Pauline authorship argue that he had theological grounds for rejecting the pastorals, namely their teaching about the goodness of creation. Cf. 1 Tim 4, 1 ff. The question remains whether Marcion knew these 3 letters and rejected them, as Tertullian says, since in 1 Timothy chapter 6, 20, false opposing arguments are referred to, with the word for opposing arguments being antithesis, the name of Marcion's work, and so a subtle hint of Marcion's heresy. However, the structure of the Church presupposed is less developed than the one Ignatius presupposes, who wrote c. 110, as well as the fact that not only is antithesis itself a Greek word which simply means opposing arguments, but as it has been noted, the attack on the heretics is not central to the 3 letters. Date. The dating of 1 Timothy depends very much on the question of authorship. Those who accept the epistle's authenticity believe it was written soon after Paul left Ephesus, which he did twice according to the Acts of the Apostles. This dates the epistle to either about the year 58 or 59, or about the year 64 or 65 AD. Those who have maintained the former opinion, among others, are Theodoret, Benson, Zachariah, Michaelis, Schmidt, Kopp, Planck, Grotius Lightfoot, Wittius, Lardner, Hug, and Professor Stewart. The latter opinion, that it was written after Paul's first imprisonment at Rome, is maintained by Paley, Pearson, L'Enfant, Leclerc, Cave, Mill, Whitby, McKnight, and others. Secular historians generally place its composition sometime in the late 1st century or first half of the 2nd century AD, with a wide margin of uncertainty. The text seems to be contending against nascent Gnosticism. Background. This historical relationship between Paul and Timothy is one of mentorship. Timothy is first mentioned in Acts chapter 16. 1. His mother Eunice and his grandmother, Lois, are mentioned in 2 Timothy chapter 1. 5. All that we know of his father is that he was a Greek, not a Jew. Acts chapter 16. 1. Paul's second visit to Lystra is when Timothy first connected with Paul. Paul not only brought Timothy into the faith, but he was Timothy's main mentor in Christian leadership. Acts chapter 16. 3. Having done church planting and missionary journeys together, Timothy would have received his authority to preach in churches directly from Paul, who of course was the greater known and accepted of the two and an apostle. Timothy's official position in the church was one of an evangelist, and he worked with Paul in Phrygia, Galatia, and Mysia, Troa, Philippi and Berea. Acts chapter 17. 14. And continued on to do even more work in Athens and Thessalonica for the church, not to mention his work in Corinth, Macedonia, Ephesus and Greater Asia. Timothy was also noted for coming to Paul's aid when Paul fell into prison. Philippians chapter 1. 1. 2 Timothy chapter 4. 13. It is noteworthy that, despite not being required due to the ruling of the Jerusalem Council, Timothy took circumcision himself in order to be a better witness among the Jews. According to church tradition, he was loyal to Paul's wishes and stayed and worked in Ephesus until he finally suffered a martyr's death himself. If, however, quote, the pastorals are best understood against the background of the 2nd century, the evidence in the letters relative to church order clearly reflect a time when apostle and prophet have been succeeded by bishop and archbishop and/or elder in a stabilized church organization fully committed to an authorized succession of ordained ministers. The local churches are no longer lay churches, nor are their needs now taken care of simply by itinerant missionaries. There is obviously hierarchical organization both in the local and ecumenical church. The chief function of the bishop, or archbishop, is to transmit and maintain the true faith. The pastorals are distinguished from all other New Testament letters in that they are addressed to a special functional class within the church, namely, the professional ministry. Thus, these letters occupy the unique distinction of being not simply the only letters in the New Testament to be addressed primarily to clergymen, but also of being in this sense the first extant pastoral letters, that is, letters written by a pastor to pastors, in the history of the church. Key themes. The author of this epistle writes to Timothy concerning the organization of the church and Timothy's own leadership within the body. Major themes include the use of the law, warnings against false doctrines such as syncretism, instructions for prayer, roles of women in the church, qualifications for leaders of the church, and the treatment of widows, elders, masters, youth, and church members in general. The structure for the role of women in the church at Ephesus is laid out, as well as a detailed list of qualifications for who can and cannot serve as elders and deacons in the church. Some outline.